Hi there, welcome back to your favorite deep dive show on stories contemporary and consequential for India. This week was of a seminal development, an equivalent of a page-marking geopolitical event of centurion scale. That of transfer of power from a receding empire to a rising one, from the United States of America to China via Alaska. For long in a Thucydides trap, the Americans somehow believed this would never happen. The coming of Donald Trump was seen as a bulwark against that eventuality. But as ironies go, it is Trump who has handed over the baton to Xi Jinping. If you read the tea leaves right, like I'm doing, and look beyond the bluster of Donald Trump, you would realize that this is a nervous America negotiating its terms of disengagement as it counts the last days of its hegemony. Let's get going.
This is an old chip that China already has. And I deal with Jensen, who's a great guy, and Nvidia. The chip that we're talking about, the H20, it's an old chip. China already has it in a different form, different name, but they have it. Or they have a combination of two will make up for it and even then some. Now, Jensen's a very brilliant guy, and Jensen also has a new chip, the Blackwell. Do you know what the Blackwell is? The Blackwell is super duper advanced. I wouldn't make a deal with that, although it's possible I'd make a deal, a somewhat enhanced in a negative way Blackwell. In other words, take 30% to 50% off of it. But that's the latest and the greatest in the world. Nobody has it. They won't have it for 5 years. But the H20 is obsolete. You know, it's one of those things, but it still has a market. So I said, listen, I want 20% if I'm going to approve this for you, for the country, for our country, for the U.S. I don't want it myself. You know, every time I say like 747, I want, yeah, for the Air Force. So I just wanted. So when I say I want 20, I want for the country. I only care about the country. I don't care about myself. And he said, would you make it 15? So we negotiate a little deal. So he's selling a essentially old chip that Huawei has a similar chip, a chip that does the same thing. And I said, good, if I'm going to give it to you, because they have they have a stopper, what we call a stopper, not allowed to do it. It's really known as a restrictive covenant. And I said, if I'm going to do that, I want you to pay us as a country something, because I'm giving you a release. I released them only from the H20.
The American empire is dead. It has run its course. A century of American domination of the world politics came to a military, economic, and most significantly, a psychological end. A declining America blinked and ceded the empire to China. This week marks the date which we can pin as the day of its demise, August 12 to be precise. On this day, the Trump administration allowed AI chip maker Nvidia to sell most of its advanced chip systems to China. This capitulation came within hours of Beijing issuing a threat that trade talks would stall if sale of those chips was not allowed. Trump gulped his ego, swallowed his pride, and nodded to Nvidia to go ahead. Like a typical bully who palpitates on meeting a match, Trump put a brave face. He said this was a deal like no other, like most things in his life, that he was only allowing a toned-down export version of the older H20 and latest Blackwell chips to be sold to the Chinese, and that he was making Nvidia pay the American government a cut on those sales. Imagine. The embargo on chip sales to China was put by the supposedly pusillanimous Biden administration, according to the mega universe. And the sale is being allowed by the macho Trump. Imagine also the cut on revenue of a private corporation that Trump has asked for is more horrible than the worst of the command and control economy a communist government could conjure. Experts have also flagged national security implications of the move.
We'll see what happens. We've been dealing very nicely with China, as you probably have heard.
Same day, Trump extended by another 90 days the activation of tariffs on China that the American president had imposed on Liberation Day as part of his larger tariff war. If this is not abject surrender, what can be? Xi Jinping has Trump by the scruff of his neck. Here, Vice President J.D. Vance, what he told Fox News. I cannot play the clip, but here's his quote. When asked how come China was getting away without Russia-specific tariffs unlike India, Vance said, well, he's thinking about it and would make a decision. The China issue is a little more complicated because our relationship with China affects a lot of other things that have nothing to do with the Russian situation. The president is reviewing his options and he would make a decision when he decides, unquote. Hours after this, Trump made the surrender with the tariff waiver. When Trump took over as president, average tariff on Chinese goods stood at between 8 to 10%. In his first month in office in February, the US raised that to 20%. The Chinese did not respond. But the Liberation Day announcement by Trump that jacked up tariffs to 140% in case of China elicited an immediate response with a reciprocal slapping of 125% tariffs on American goods exports. The message was loud and clear. Xi Jinping was willing to stare down the bully. There was some song and dance by Trump, but through the loud saber rattling, it was clear that it was less of saber and more of rattle. Even the Trump inner circle realized that this would backfire. Came the first climb down with a truce being announced in the month of May, and the Americans brought down the tariffs to 30%. The Chinese matched steps, cooling their side to 20%. Things stood there, and the May truce now gets extended till November 10, providing enough time for American importers to stock up on Chinese goods for the festive season of Christmas and the winters. Imagine. For all the bombast of Trump, his administration blinked first. For all the bluster, the Chinese matched him step for step, proving his threats to be hollow and useless as a negotiation tool. While there is none, people do want to believe that there's a method to Trump's madness. It could be a coincidence, but the 3-month extension of truce came around the same time that America recorded highest inflation numbers for the consumers since February. Against a target of 2% by the Federal Bank, the figure stood at 2.7%. But like other statistics, this hides the story more than it reveals. The core inflation, minus food and energy costs, stood at a steep 3.1%, and areas like air tickets and tomatoes increased by 4 and 3.3%. While the numbers might still be giving a mixed grocery bag, the pattern is clear. Inflation is headed north, and sooner than later, American consumer would foot the bill. This was third month on the trot that inflation kept inching upwards. Dollar caught cold, falling against most currencies. The US greenback is in fact down 11% since January this year. And this is the biggest slide in the last 50 years. Economists would tell you that the cascading effect of tariffs takes some time to show up on your plate. For one, most of the importers had stocked up on old rate supplies. They get another 90 days to tide over the Yuletide spirits. But sooner than later, the new tariffs would catch up. Goldman Sachs released a report suggesting this could be as soon as fall. The report said consumers could bear as much as 2/3 of the costs. Trump has claimed that tariffs have landed US Treasury some $300 billion of bounty, which puts the Goldman estimate at $200 billion that Americans, both mega and non-mega, would pay over and above what they would have under the new tariff regime as it kicks in. Goldman CEO got berated by Trump from his bully pulpit of Truth Social. But the rumblings of exasperation are already in the air.
Bananas. What's the tariff on bananas? Americans, by the way, love bananas. We buy billions of them a year. I love bananas. What's the tariff on bananas?
The tariff on bananas would be representative of the countries that produce them.
And what's that tariff?
Generally 10%.
Correct, 10%. Walmart has already increased the cost of bananas by 8%.
But as countries do deals with us, that will go to zero. As countries do deals with us, that will go to zero.
But the cost is on the American consumer now and on the businesses with the confusion now. Mr. Secretary, I believe you know better. I believe you recognize that a trade deficit is not something to fear. I believe you know that predictability, stability is essential for businesses. I wish you would show that truth to this administration.
This exchange took place in a Congress hearing on the Capitol this week, where Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was caught fumbling and groping for facts, as there are none, to support his outlandish claims. Just to explain, the frustration of the questioning Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. There's a reason America predominantly imports the bananas that it consumes. The agri-climatic conditions do not support commercial-scale banana cultivation, as a result of which the United States imports almost all of its banana that they consume from Latin America. In 2023, the import bill stood at US $3 billion plus. The frustrated Dean was asking Lutnick how the administration planned to tackle the increasing cost of bananas at Walmart due to the tariffs on that import bill. She said it's already up about 8%. Lutnick said we would produce more. If climate allowed, America would have produced bananas already. More proof of the end of the empire kept coming through this week. US national debt hit a record high of US $37 trillion. That's about 50% over and above the US GDP. But more significantly, the last $1 trillion was added in just the last 8 months, against the 36th trillion, which took 11 months. So the US economy is hurtling into a debt trap at a fast clip. Nikki Haley, a one-time team member and then a ticket contestant against Trump, called it very un-Republican and non-conservative to hurtle down the unsustainable fiscal path. Another report came this week which showed how there was zero jobs growth in the last 3 months. In response, Trump sacked the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, calling out her a Biden administration appointee. On military front, China claimed on Wednesday that its Navy had chased out a US Navy frigate, Higgins, out of the Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. Though disputed by the Americans, it at least shows the nonchalance with which the Chinese are playing around with American narrative. While lots of song and dance was made of Trump ordering a nuclear submarine closer to Russia in response to statements made by its former president Medvedev, Russia quietly sent its own to Cuba. Imagine, in 1962, this had led to the Bay of Pigs crisis, which had the world watching with bated breath. This time it passed off in a whimper, largely because despite his braggadocio, Trump did not know how to escalate perhaps. Look at these pictures of a joint Russian-Chinese flotilla into the Bering Straits off the coast of Alaska. The US Navy had to scramble a warship from its third fleet, the USS Carl M. Levin, into North Pacific as a counter-deployment. This was a day before the proposed Trump-Putin talks. Obviously, Putin and Xi coordinated their moves to remain one-up on Americans in the mind games. And talking of the mind games, the buildup had nerves written all over Trump. Listen to these sound bites.
You have to understand, this is a war that should have never happened. This is a war that wouldn't have happened if I were president. It would have never happened. It was the apple of his eye. I got along very well with President Putin. But if you look, under President Bush, they took a lot of territory. Under President Obama, they took a lot of territory. Under Biden, they essentially took the whole thing. I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war. You got to end it. And he wasn't going to mess with me. This war would have never happened. You know, we had a discussion about it one time, and we never had that discussion again. Would have never happened. Almost as complex as this one, having to do with routes, trade.
Successful meeting on Friday with Vladimir Putin.
Well, we're going to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin, and at the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made.
How will you know that?
Because that's what I do. I make deals.
Once he's saying he's going to finalize the deal in the same meeting, Then he says this is just a get-to-know meeting. And then realizing he might have given away too much, he comes to bullying self, threatening dire consequences, which basically means more tariffs and more sanctions against Russia. Things that Putin has very successfully weathered out for the last 3 years. What China has done holds a lesson here for the rest of the world and how to deal with Trump tantrums. You can return the fire and he would back off. You can capitulate like Europe and Japan have done and face more pushback. And then there is the third way, the middle path typically associated with India, which we have deployed to a telling effect. Silence, no reaction, stoic non-reaction. Keep the other side guessing. Look at it. Since he went hammer and tongs against India, in the process ruining at least 3 decades of hard work on both the sides to steady the ship, there has not been not a single word that can be seen as Prime Minister Modi taking pot shots at Trump. The silence speaks volumes. Not that the rest of the system has not taken a position. From Rajnath Singh to Shivraj Singh Chauhan, from Nitin Gadkari to N. Chandrababu Naidu, and even a retired Venkaiah Naidu. These are seniors of the Delhi establishment and have publicly expressed annoyance at Trump's conduct. Listen to a sliver of those sound bites.
कुछ लोग हैं जो भारत का विकास जितनी तेजी के साथ हो रहा है उन्हें रास नहीं आ रहा है, उन्हें अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है। सबके बास तो हम हैं, भारत कैसे इतनी तेजी के साथ बढ़ रहा है।
आज जो दादागिरी करते इसलिए कर रहे कि वो आर्थिक दृष्टि से संपन्न है। दादागिरी इसलिए करते हैं कि उनके पास टेक्नोलॉजी है। अगर उनसे अच्छी टेक्नोलॉजी और रिसोर्सेज हमारे पास आएंगे तो हमें दादागिरी नहीं करनी है। हमारी संस्कृति तो ये कहती है कि विश्व का कल्याण हो,
कि व्यक्तिगत रूप से मेरा कितना भी बड़ा नुकसान हो जाए लेकिन किसान हितों के साथ समझौता नहीं किया जाएगा, नहीं किया जाएगा, नहीं किया जाएगा। ये भारत की आवाज है, ये भारत के किसानों की आवाज है। किसान भाइयों निश्चिंत रहना।
We will pursue policies which are in our national interests. There is no question of compromise or succumbing to pressure from anybody. We are the largest democracy in the world and we believe what we are doing is good. And we would like to keep a good relation with all, including with America, because both are democracies that way.
And there were protests in Amreli of Gujarat. I thought significant because it's Prime Minister's home state. This should worry the Americans. Till now, the circumspection of Americans was limited to the New Delhi elites on Raisina Hill. Trump might have taken it to the Indian street. The kind of misreading that's happening in Washington, D.C. on the Modi government was seen in a comment made by their Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. In what smacks of racism, he called India recalcitrant on trade deal because we are holding our ground, with a tone as if we owe it to them, because the Modi government has not signed on the dotted line. This just shows how unprepared Trump came into the administration. His team has not done any due diligence on how the systems under Modi work. Otherwise, they would have studied India's moves on RCEP, the China-dominated trade agreement of Southeast Asia, from which India walked out. Had Trump studied Modi, he would have or not have made the mistake of jumping the gun on India-Pakistan ceasefire. But then it's asking for too much, perhaps. Trump is known to have little patience for reading or study. Anecdotally, the president's daily briefing from security agencies for the Trump White House are supposed to not cross one page to keep president's attention. Had it not been for this mix of impatience and ego, Trump would not have created the geopolitical shockwaves he has been creating. But even more significantly, speeding up the decline of the American empire. Today, nobody respects America. What the Trumpist mega buffoonery passes off as surrender is tactical adjustment everyone else is making till the tempest blows over. A lot of watchers of India-US relations have argued that India could have easily bought peace with Trump by quickly acknowledging the American role in the ceasefire with Pakistan. They are misreading Trump's malice. They are misreading Trump's megalomania. This is misreading of the roots of Trump's motivation in a private, corrupt money deal Trump family has cut with Pakistan and its army. There was no question of accepting Trump's role in ceasefire. There is no question of accepting it going forward. What are the policy consequences for India? One, we would need to double down on our multi-alignment posture. It is part of our DNA, and we need not budge from it. A glimpse of this has happened this past week between NSA Doval visit to Moscow and the shrugging off the Pakistani provocation. The upcoming visit of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi to New Delhi, Jaishankar's visit to Moscow this week, and that of Prime Minister Modi to China for the SCO summit a week later, though part of ongoing mechanisms, do give a picture of normality, and in diplomacy, optics count. I would say India is better off sitting out the Trump term. He has burnt his bridges psychologically with a good section of Indians who thought he was good. Trump might have irreparably damaged the overall trajectory of India-US ties. There was already an element of mistrust against Americans for the Cold War era overhang. And by allowing General Asim Munir to issue nuclear threats from American soil, Trump has reinforced those Pavlovian reflexes that America cannot be trusted. PM Modi is right in holding his fire against Trump. That's the right strategy to deal with an attention-seeking egotist bully. Thank you for your kind attention to this matter, and thanks for watching.